So now let's talk about the stuff along the top here that's not really linked to any particular team or project. Pings are direct messages, and these work exactly the way you would expect. You click on a person, you can see the conversation you're having, you can say hello there, whatever it is that you want to say. And when you click on a ping, it will show you any of the pings you haven't read yet. So I can click here and see the message, and now it's marked as read. So if I go back to pings, I'll say I don't have any unviewed pings. Hey is where your notifications live. Incidentally, it's also the name of Basecamp's new specialized email service that I think was partially inspired by this Hey menu. So this is where your notifications live. So you have your previous notifications that are exactly what you would expect, and then you would have notifications that you haven't looked at yet. So here we have a student who posted a message about adding something to a separate wiki that we have. Anyway, this is where your notifications live. It works the way you expect. Activity lets you see some different things. So all the latest activity is basically a record of everything that is happening in Basecamp. So anytime something happens in Basecamp, someone here made a comment on a post about this circuit board, that shows up in the activity. So this is everything. So if you want to look at your own to-dos specifically, you can particularly see your overdue to-dos. If you want to see something a little more general, we can look at what is happening with to-dos being added or completed recently. If you want to see what someone else is up to, you can look at someone's assignments to look at their to-dos. So this will give me a way of seeing if somebody's getting behind on their to-dos. And if I want to see more generally what somebody's up to, you can click on someone's activity, and then I can pick a person. And if I click on that person, that will tell me everything they've been up to on Basecamp. And this is all of the things that they're doing, comments that they're making on other people's entries, files that they've uploaded, messages that they've posted, what's going on with their to-dos, etc., etc., etc. So VIP has historically used a notebook, a lab notebook, as a way of students documenting their progress. As far as I'm concerned, I allow certain things to count as that kind of documentation. That includes commits on GitHub. That includes posts on a separate blog once we've agreed to where you're posting, like on the blog that the MSci 8080 team keeps, where once they have something developed to the point that they want to share it to the world, they post that to their blog. I include on that changes made to the wiki, because I can see who's editing what on the wiki. And in particular, I look at your activity on Basecamp. If I don't see activity on Basecamp, I will start to get the impression that you're not working on VIP, and then we may chat. Let's see, the last thing here is upcoming dates. You can sort of see what's going on the various calendars of all of the various projects and teams that you're subscribed to. And it's not just events that were placed on the schedule through the schedule tool. It also includes your to-dos. So we talked about how the activity selection up here lets you look at the activity of a particular person. Similarly, if you pick one of the teams or one of the projects and you scroll down, below the tools, you will find an activity log for that particular project or team. So I like this because it lets me slice the overall project two different directions. I can either look at what a particular person has been up to, or I can look at what a particular project has been up to. I have these two orthogonal projections of what's going on. Let's see, the one thing we haven't talked about in this menu, well, other than find, and it's obvious what that does, is my stuff. So you can look at all of your to-dos at once, including to-dos that you've assigned to other people. Bookmarks, oh, you know what? I don't think I've actually used bookmarks. There are bookmarks. Great. All right. My schedule, This is all the various calendar things pertaining specifically to you in some way. Drafts. So if you start a message, but you don't actually post it and you save it as a draft, those are easy to lose track of. Here you can get all of those in one spot and not lose track of them. Here's your own activity, as you might expect. Boosts. These are the great little happy things that people send you that are notified just to you, but not other people on that message or calendar entry or whatever it is that they're sending you a boost on. The search feature in Basecamp is fantastic, and one thing in particular is that I want to mention that you can search on people, and if you click on a particular person, you can directly send them a ping, you can look at their to-dos, or you can look at their activity log directly from this one-stop shop menu instead of having to click on activity. The last thing I'll mention here is the various settings that you can modify by clicking on your little picture in the upper right-hand corner there. So this is the place where you can change your password, set up your cute little picture here, whatever it might be. Let's see. One other thing I should mention is that you can turn various notifications on and off for individual projects. If we go to the project, so let's go to Astrocade Fun here, and I click here in the upper right, you can say, stop following a project. And what that means is you won't be getting notifications on it anymore, but you'll still be able to go in and look at stuff on the project. Now, of course, if you stop following the project, you can go back in and you can follow it again and turn the notifications back on. This is important because I have a lot of students who kind of want to vaguely follow along what's happening with the project when they happen to get time to drop in and take a look, but they're not the main actors on that project. And this feature lets them drop in when they want to, but not get overwhelmed with notifications on a project they're not directly involved in. By default, the various projects are listed in alphabetical order. Now, if you have some projects that you're just following along with, but they're not your main projects, you might want to just have them in alphabetical order. But if you happen to be specifically working on the Donkey Kong Bongos project, then you might want to pin that project so that it shows up at the top of the list. You can also archive old projects or just trash them. Most of the time, I will archive a project. This is basically the spot where I put projects that are really just kind of done and unlikely to be brought back. For projects that are just temporarily on hiatus until whoever might have been working on a project and then took a semester off to do a co-op came back, or perhaps a new student joins the project that's interested in continuing the work in progress, then for those kind of projects, while they're in kind of the dormant state, I put these Z's in front of them to indicate that they're projects in sleep mode, basically, and also Z's force them to the bottom of the list. And when one of these projects is resurrected, like we probably will for the 1987 computer project, I'll rename it and take the Z's off. Up here in the upper right, I have admin land. As administrator, I can go to it. If I have the window shrunk a little bit, then admin land disappears there and appears at the bottom of the page. Let me go ahead and pull this back out. Let's go to admin land. And here you can do a whole bunch of different stuff that you might expect an administrator to need to do. The main thing I want to show you here is about adding or removing people. Now, when you add someone, you can add them as part of your team, and this is the feature I always use. There's an option to add someone as a client, and the main difference here is that when you add someone as a client, it starts out extremely restrictive in terms of what they can do and what they can access, and you have to affirmatively add capabilities to whoever you're adding. When you add someone to your team, it's assumed that they're in the inner circle. So you can give someone a name, and they can change this later if they want. And that's useful for me at the beginning of the semester where I load everybody's name into Basecamp from the official data from Georgia Tech's registration system. And they can later change from something like Abraham to Abe if they want, without me having to intervene. So you can give them an email address and you can give them their job title. Now, for my purposes, I tend to give them something like what their major is, what year they are, like junior or senior or sophomore or whatever. And then I'll put something like 2 CR or 3 CR or 1 CR for the number of credit hours they happen to be signing up for. So this is useful both for me when I'm trying to figure out what people may or may not be good at already, and it's also useful for me in terms of figuring out how much to bug people in terms of making them do the amount of work appropriate for the amount of credit hours they've signed up for. And also other students can see this as well. I personally resonate with the views of their founders, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson. DHH, as he's known, is known for creating Ruby on Rails and also getting into various fights with people on Twitter. They both tend to be iconoclastic, and I highly recommend their book Rework, which turns a lot of conventional wisdom about businesses and startups in particular on its head. One thing about Basecamp is that they've always been profitable. They're not one of these companies like Uber that has never actually turned a profit and yet is valued at a stupid amount of money. I guess the most extreme case of that sort of thing is if you get into is something like WeWork, where it's valued at a crazy amount of money, even though it doesn't really have a way to actually make money. So in addition to the Rework book, you should also check out the Rework podcast. And they have some great resources about remote working, including a book called Remote and a question and answer that you should definitely check out. It's about 2 hours long or so. It's something that they started, I think, around when the COVID-19 outbreak began. And they have lots of other resources and videos and talks and such. So you may notice that on my homepage, there's this "You're using Basecamp for Education" note. So if you're a business, the standard Basecamp rate is $99 a month, and that's for unlimited users. So that's very different than something like Slack, at least to my understanding, that charges you more the more users you include on it. But if you are a teacher or a student using it for classroom work, you can actually use it for free. In order to do that, this has to be for classroom work. So if you're intending to use it with one of your clubs at your university, it probably isn't going to count for that. Similarly, say the accounting department in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering wouldn't be able to use this education discount. Fortunately, VIP is giving class credit, so it counts under this formula. Also, things like your capstone design project team would fit under this formula. What you need to do is sign up for the free trial, and before the free trial times out, you need to email the Basecamp folks, explain to them who you are, provide proof of you being a teacher or student at a school in a specific class, and explain what you're going to do with it for that class. Then they'll set you up. And the tech support at Basecamp is amazing. Every time I've emailed them, they got back to me within 10 minutes, and that includes setting up the educational account. Now, if Basecamp looks interesting, but you don't have a specific classroom use for it that you can document, there is another thing you can try, which is Basecamp Personal. So Basecamp Personal is totally free, and you don't need to prove anything to a human. You don't need to contact a human at all. It does have some limitations. You can only have 3 projects. You don't have the team category. You have a maximum of 20 users, and you're limited on the amount of docs and file space you have. But if you look at this, this would be useful for a lot of different applications. This could be used for a family planning their vacation, assuming one day that people going places on vacation becomes a thing again. Some non-class work at a university, like for an individual committee, could easily run with this limited functionality. A committee at something like a church could use this. It's really cool that they have this option available. It's interesting that they don't advertise it. And it's also interesting that Basecamp, to a large extent, doesn't really advertise much at all. You won't see ads for them showing up on YouTube. They are one of the oldest apps of its kind. I think they got it started around 2004, 2005, something like that. And they really have made a decision just to spread by word of mouth and grow at a reasonable rate and not chase this venture capital pushed exponential growth sort of nonsense that can actually be destructive to some companies that have a legitimate business model but wind up on this ultimately destructive path. Now, if you are not one of my VIP students at the start of the semester, then you should tune out now. But if you are one of my VIP students and I've asked you to watch this video, I want you to prove to me that you've watched it by emailing me a picture of a cute animal. Let's try capybara, and let's say quokka, and what else? Oh, how about a chinchilla? Chinchillas are cute. So send me a picture of one of these cute animals being cute, and then I'll know you've watched the video. Email this to me at my usual Georgia Tech email address. Pretty much for all other VIP-related communications, I want to handle it through Basecamp. So ping me on Basecamp for everything else. But for the cute animal picture, use email.